Welcome back to the podcast, Ankit Patel.
Hey, welcome, Steve. Thanks for
Great to
having me.
have you. Yeah, we've had you back a few times, so it's always good to hear from you. Last time you were on, we focused on how you and your wife are using AI in your own practice. And if you didn't get a chance to listen to that, I would highly suggest to go back and listen to it. Ankit is doing a lot of really innovative things. You're always seems to be a couple steps ahead of the game. So with AI, with technology, if you want to see where the trends are going, pay attention to Ankit, jump onto some of the podcasts that we've done with him in the past. And today we're going to take it a step further. We're going to talk about how Ankit is leveraging AI inside of his other business, My Business Care Team, which provides virtual staffing solutions for eye care practices across the country. But Ankit, before we dive in, if you could just tell us a little bit about your company, what they do, and maybe a general overview of why practices should be using AI to address one of the areas that we're going to talk about today and one of the biggest pain points for independent optometry practices, and that would be staffing.
Yeah. And so appreciate that, Steve. My business care team was born out of necessity. My wife and I, at the time, we had 4 locations and we started centralizing some of our phones and some of our admin tasks. And when we started doing that, we started looking outside the 4 walls of our offices to try to get help and support. And fast forward, here we are with my business care team helping other doctors do the same. And we were intentional about calling it My Business Care Team. And we didn't want to call it like Virtual Assistants R Us or something like that. Mainly because the focus is specifically on optometry and optometrist and take care of the business. So you take care of your patients, you have your patient care team, we're the business care team for your business is the idea behind it. So we're not married to any one given solution. Right now, we've been heavily focused in on virtual staffing and taking care of that. But as we're going to talk about today, technology is making that less and less dependent on people in a lot of ways. So we're focused heavily on AI and how to use AI to fill in some of these gaps that traditionally only a human being could do.
Your company focuses on virtual staffing, and through that, I think you started using AI on your practice, but it was a very logical transition to start using that with your other business as well. Give us a little background on how you're using it for something that you have to do. Owning a VA company is training and development, and focus how I'm curious how you're using it, but also if you could relate that to some of those skills and some of those principles to the independent practice as well.
So I'll start off at a high level in terms of what is AI, right? Ultimately, I don't know if you ever heard of a concept called the job to be done. It's basically the best way that I've heard it described. If you go to the hardware store and you're looking to buy a drill, what you really don't want a drill, you want a hole in the wall. All right. And you could even abstract it even further. Well, you don't want a hole in the wall. You want to hang a picture. Well, you don't really want to hang a picture. You want to feel a certain way when you walk into the room, right? So what is the actual job to be done? And AI is just one of those tools. It's like a drill, right? Depending on what needs to be done and learning what it's good at. So you know how they say everything, if you have a hammer, everything's a nail. AI is kind of getting that reputation, like, oh, you can do everything with AI. Well, yes and no. There are some things that it works better for than others. And so what we're looking at is testing and using it in areas where it makes most sense. And where it usually makes most sense is it helps a little bit with cognition. So if you had something in the past that was a little bit gray or fuzzy, or there's some element of taste like writing styles or how to send a message, and it wasn't an exact answer always required. AI is really good at that. And so it kind of helps zero in on, hey, this is the right direction that we need to go. And it can alleviate a lot of the work. Now, most AI, not at all, most of them are a little bit, you still need what's called a human in the loop, right? Meaning that you still have to have review the work, still look at it, and still make sure it's accurate. But instead of having 3, 4 people do a particular task, you might be able to do it with 1 or 2 and have AI kind of supplement the rest of it. So it makes folks more productive. You still have to know what to give it, right? Garbage in equals garbage out is the old adage. So you kind of have to understand how to think about it. So ultimately, you still have to kind of know how to structure it and use AI, just like you would treat it like an employee. I think you guys actually said that at your conference at the IDOC conference is, you know, like you would another staff member, junior staff member, you would give them clear instructions on what to do. And AI is similar in that vein.
So for a practice looking for more specific help on the training and development side,
Mhm.
and there's a lot of gaps in many practices. A lot of practices will say, well, we struggle with time. We don't have time to do all the training that we need. I tend to see training positioned as something that has an endpoint versus what I like to call development, which is an ongoing process of constantly pouring into and investing and developing your people. Um, what kind of how can AI operate as a tool to facilitate training and development in practices?
Yeah, I think so. Let's talk about a couple different things there. I want to break that down. So similar to just like, you don't want to drill, you want a hole right in the wall. You don't necessarily want to use AI. You want to avoid what I call false negatives and false positives. So if you hire someone in the interview process, you want to make sure they're going to be the right person for the job, and you don't want to bring on someone who you thought was the right person who's not, which is probably that's what's called a false positive. You think they're a right fit, but they're not. And so, how do you avoid that? The false negative is usually not as common. False negative is like, oh, we thought well, you don't know if they're false negative because they could have been a good fit, but you didn't hire them because they didn't pass your criteria. So, what you can use AI for in that process in the flow is to help you understand what's required for the job. So, here's a great workflow that we use. Um, we take our values in our company, and what I say is, I will give it here's my values, and here's the position, and here's what I want the position to do. Help me create a job description around this that aligns with our values and what I need for this position, and what else am I missing? And you can have a conversation back and forth with the AI, and ultimately come down to a job description for the job. And a great example of this is how every office is a little bit different. Your opticians, or let's say tech, is actually a better example. Some techs, if you're in a high glass to sale type clinic, you may not have your techs do dilation or refractions, right? But if you're medically oriented, your techs are going to be doing that. So the job description is going to be very different for your type of person there, and you may want different experiences. At our offices, a little more boutique. We want more questions. We want a better experience for the patient. And so we want someone who's a little more sociable, a little bit more inquisitive with the patients. Versus in a high volume office, now you need someone that knows their stuff, can dot their I's, cross their T's, and move. And so that job description and the way, the tone that the job description and the job ads are written are going to be geared towards that direction. So use the AI to help the job description, and then take that job description and create a job ad or a job posting. And in the job posting, you want to say, I want to attract the right type of psychology of this person that would do really well in this job. And so it'll write it in a way that's nice, and get you what you need. And you can play with the wording, right? You can say like, oh, I want a lot of applicants to this job, right? In a way that'll get a lot of applicants. And it may or may not work, right? Something worthwhile testing, but you can think of it as a really smart person that can take direction. So first step is come up with a job description based off of what you want in your company values, if you have them, and what's important to you. Then take that, turn it into a job posting. And then after you have the job posting, then what we say is, okay, take the job posting, take the job description, put those together, give them to AI, say, hey, this is my job description. Here's my job posting. What I would like for you to do is generate behavior-based questions that will help me understand if the candidate is a good job for a good fit for this job. In addition to the questions, also make sure you output potential red flags, and also put in what a perfect candidate might look like. And so when you get this output, what you're going to have is maybe five, like anywhere from like 3 to 10 questions that the AI will generate for you. Very specific questions that are related to the job function, that are behavior-based questions. So behavior-based questions, for those you don't know, are questions like, tell me about a time in the past where you did X. And they have to tell you an actual time. And that's one of the best techniques for interviewing. Um, you really want to make sure they give you actual examples, by the way. And so when you actually do the interview and you're getting this criteria, make sure you press them for, no, I don't want hypotheticals. I want exact examples from your experience. And so that's important to note. But the output is questions, red flags, and what does really good look like in this candidate. Now you have a way of kind of measuring against it. If you really want to go another level, record that first interview you have with the person. So do it virtually or on the phone, or I like Google Meet or Zoom, and then you can use an app called like Fathom or Otter. There's a million of them out there that do the transcript recording. Uh, what you do is you basically go through, ask your behavior-based questions, ask any other questions you want, and then you have your job description, you have your behavior-based questions. What you do is you can just open up a new chat, dump in your job description, dump in your behavior-based questions, dump in your job ad, and say, "Hey, I interviewed this candidate, and this is their response. Grade them against the behavior-based questions in the job description, how well they would do. 100 being the perfect fit, 0 being the worst fit. Use your best judgment, and if you don't know, normalize it to a score of 50." So I say like, hey, if you don't know, don't have enough evidence, normalize to a score of 50, but or lower. Um, and so now you have an output of a score. And so now you can say, like, based off the first interview, you have a really structured approach to say, well, I have these candidates. I'm not sure who's good and who's not. Now you have a really good way of seeing, like, oh, yeah, this person got an 80 on this one. This person got a 43. The person who's 80 is probably going to be better, right? And so remember, when you ask those questions too that come out, they're going to be questions like, tell me about a time you had to deal with an upset patient, and what did you do? Well, this is what I would do. I would kind of make sure they're okay. You make them feel heard. Like, no, 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 I'm sorry. Let me be a little more clear. Tell me about a specific example. You can even, just use the first name of the patient if you want, right? Just tell me about a specific patient that you actually dealt with and what were the steps you took. And so you're kind of making sure that they talk through different processes. The AI, when you ask it for behavior-based questions, will generate a really good person should say X, Y, Z. So in this example, I'm not sure what AI would say, but it might say something like, for dealing with upset patients, they would try to make sure to validate the emotions, make sure to de-escalate the situation, try to find solutions to the problems. Which what are red flags are basically things like escalating the situation even more, or not having an example at all, or not sharing an example. Those would be red flags, and then it'll kind of it'll and like I said, it's like cognition, right? It'll give you a score based off of how they answered. It's not exact science how that scores. So just keep that in mind, that it's not, don't take it as gospel, take it as directional. So if you have several people like scoring 20, 30, 40, 50, but you have one or two candidates scoring like 60, 70, 80, 90, you might want to look at the candidates that are scoring more if you have decisions to make. So this process really, really goes in, and you learn a lot about the person too, because it'll tell you to ask questions. You're like, oh, I didn't think of that. That's a really good point. Let me see if this person actually knows how to do this. And that's actually been a great way we use AI in every job position. And the nice thing is too, the person doing the interview doesn't have to know anything about the job at this point either, which is something unique, right? So a lot of our virtual assistants or our staff members will run the interviews for jobs they have no idea if this is a good fit or not, but they just know what questions to ask. And then the AI does the vetting. So it actually sorts them out to where, okay, now before they go to Ankit or the hiring manager, they actually know, you actually have some sort of like, oh, we have some sort of screener, some sort of way of separating folks.
So it systemizes the process, which takes a lot of guesswork out. I hope anyone listening to this actually goes back and listens to that entire section and takes notes. And I say that because I think that alone could significantly increase the chances of getting the right person. A couple of things I want to unwrap here that you talked about. One is the behavioral based concept. I had read this study before that when you interview somebody using what you might call traditional interview methods, your chance of getting the right person, you talked about a false positive, false negative, your chance of getting the person you think you're getting is only about 10%. Because if you think about it, when we come into an interview, and we've probably been on the other side too, we're trying to make an impression. We're trying to guess the things that the other person wants us to hear. And we're even looking for those clues where a lot of interviewers actually make the mistake of saying too much in the beginning and telling the other person what you're looking for, which is just giving them the answers to the test. And it's when you get closer to that behavioral based model, it takes that 10% closer to 60 to 70%, which isn't perfect, but it's a heck of a lot better than 10% asking good questions. So using AI to come up with those questions. You talked about values as well. I like to call them core values. We're probably talking about the same thing,
Yep.
but it's something I think you got to get really clear on as a business owner. What are my core values? Because those are the things, the 3, 4, 5 things, sort of the non-negotiables in your practice that you want to hire for. Those are the qualities. when we talk about hiring for personality and training for skills. What is the personality? Some people don't even know what that is, but getting very clear on what those characteristics are. And then the third thing I'll mention is the context that you're talking about giving AI in terms of the prompts. The more detail, the more information. And it's probably the most important thing, at least with the traditional platforms like ChatGPT and Claude, in giving a lot of context around what you're looking for. You talk about giving a description, being very clear on what the values are, and building that into the questions. And that I love how you can use AI to give answers or give insight into what kind of answers you should be getting. Because even if we know how to ask the questions, that doesn't necessarily mean that we know what to look for in terms of the answers.
Yeah, that's spot on. And using it as sort of a thought partner too. You can also you can be very meta about it too. Hey, tell me how I can make this prompt better. So you can actually say, I'm thinking about asking an AI this question. How would I write this better to get a better output? And this is the output I'm looking for. So this is really good when you're coming up with a rubric or grading criteria, which we can talk about how to do training. Is hey, this is what I think I need. Is this really what I need? Can I write this better? And then you take that output and put it back into AI, and the output's so much better.
Let's talk about training because that seems like a logical next step. So you found the perfect candidate, right? You went through that process. You did the recruiting, the job ad, the interviewing, and you got somebody. Now, this is where sometimes, I like to say that sometimes employees fail management and sometimes management fails employee, or employees fail management, or sometimes management fail the employee. Bringing on somebody who would otherwise be a great candidate, but not given them the necessary feedback, training, resources to succeed is management failing the employee. So, how do you use AI to utilize the training process?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. So we use it a lot of different ways, and there's a million and one ways to do it. Uh, and so again, going back to the same concept of use it wherever there's cognition required. So now instead of just doing a multiple choice test, you can write open-ended questions, and it can grade that for you, right? And you can kind of specify that. So from an assessment standpoint, writing assessments and both grading assessments, it can do that for you from a learning standpoint, you can use it to learn topics. Now, be careful with this because it can hallucinate, meaning that the way the technology works is not deterministic, which means that they're not always the same output. And sometimes it can go down a path that's not always accurate. And so, what I like to say is do it in small chunks and verify it, but you can use it to design your whole program. You can ask it, hey, what should I do for a tech coming on board? This is a job description. I need a 30, 60, 90-day plan. I need to know exactly what they need to know within week 1, week 2, week 3, and how do I and create the assessment for it as well. Now you might need to break this up into several chunks, depending on the model you're using, but just think through step by step what you need. So step one is I have the candidate, right? So I want a 90-day plan for them. So I'm going to take the job description and say, here's a job description. Here's a metrics that I may want to do. If you don't know their metrics, say, hey, how should I measure success for this person based off this job function? And tell me day in and day out measurements that might work that I could track internally in my optometry office. You have all that information. Then you say, okay, create a 9-day plan, a week to week plan with topics on what the person should know and from week to week. You have the topics. Then you say, okay, take topic one, or say, okay, now create a rubric and an assessment around this that I know that this person has deep insightful knowledge and not just parroting information back to me. So, I think I like to ask this question in interviews sometimes to opticians. This is a good example. I was like, hey, if someone comes in and they say, you know what, it just feels like I'm in a fishbowl. Like, what do you do? How do you fix that? And the ones that are sort of like quote unquote parroting back will say something along the lines of, oh, you just need to, you just make the frame a little flatter, or change the frame shape and bend it or whatever, right? But that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a high understanding. What I'm looking for, the answer, what I'm looking for roughly is, and it's not a complete answer, but it's a rough answer is, hey, the base curve is not right for the prescription. Right. And so that's what I want them to understand that. So there's a nuance there that they can say. Technically, they're not wrong. That, yeah, you could kind of mimic adjusting the base curve by modifying the frame a little bit, depending on the frame and how much it's wrapped. But the real answer is the base curve of the lens probably needs to change based off of the prescription, potentially. And so understanding those nuances, AI can help tease those out if you ask it to tease those types of nuances out. So you know your team actually knows the stuff versus hey, we're just reading back what we read on in a book.
Ankit, do you see many practices training their staff how to use AI? Because a lot of times these AI discussions tend to focus on how owners, how ODs can better understand it so they can do the things that we're talking about. You can hire better, you can train better. But is part of that training seems like it could be applicable to the staff as well. And I don't know if we're seeing that or not, where doctors are going to their staff and say, let me teach you AI to better do your job. Or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe it's the doctors going to the staff and say, teach me AI. But where do we, is that something you feel should be translated to the entire team?
Yeah, I think so. And I think we're going to see it's a little bit of the wild, wild west right now with AI in terms of there's so many different tools that do the same thing. And there's so many different ways to get to the same answer. And so it's about picking a lane and sticking with it. And what I tell people is there's so if you want to get started, there's the best way to do it instead of buying like ChatGPT for 20 bucks a month and paying for your team. If you're a little tech savvy, if you need help with this, my team can help set this up for you all. But you can go to any of the platforms and you can get API keys, and that's not that hard to do. You just sign up. There's a couple little nuances you can do, and then once you have the API keys, then you can go to a platform which we like to use called Typing Mind. That's pretty inexpensive for a license, and you have access to as many models as you like. So some models work different for different things. And then what you do is you start creating little agents for it. So if there's some one person who's really good at this stuff, they know how to create these things, right? They're able to create agents. So what we've done is create an agent that actually can take a job description and turn it into behavior-based questions. So now all the staff has to do is literally just plug in the job description. It'll do that work for them. Another one that will take that, you input the rubric and you input the transcript and it'll score it for you and give you an output, right? And so you can set up these workflows to make it easier for your staff. So you don't have to have everyone that knows everything. You just got to have someone that can implement it into your workflow to make things easier for you. Like the opticians are always the best techs are always the best opticians, and vice versa, right? And so you want to find where people are strongest and how they can leverage it. Another way we use this is say, hey, you have access to this. Here are the problems. Like if you do an L10 meeting or any kind of meeting, how do we use AI to solve this problem? What could AI help us with? Where are we getting stuck? And is there something that AI can help us with? And the way you think about that is well, one, just ask AI. It's like, hey, we're getting stuck here, right? Tell me how we would fix this. What are some options? Another way is actually using AI in the workflow to fix the problem. Another way, and so you can use it as a sort of a consultant. That's the easiest way to use it. It's like, hey, I'm thinking about this. Tell me about this. What am I missing here? That's the fastest, easiest way for anyone on the team to use it. The more complex way is what we've talked about is integrating into your workflow to take off some workload from your team.
Yeah, and you're right. It is still the wild, wild west. That's something even we're dealing with here at iDoc as I'm part of a team that has weekly discussions on how we can utilize it as a team at iDoc. But, there's concerns that come up as well that if you're a doctor listening to this and you want your staff to be using AI more, I think that's something definitely worth considering. But you also got to consider HIPAA issues. You mentioned hallucinations. The information you get isn't always correct, and we're dealing sometimes with medical information. Optical information is what we're getting from AI correct? There's ethical issues. So there's definitely aspects of this that we still need to be um, supervising it to some degree, I think, instead of just turning it over to the entire team.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, we talked about this last time. If we have this conversation a week or two from now, it'll be different again because there's so many moving parts to this. And it's moving so fast now. It's even faster than it was when we were talking a couple of months ago. Last time I talked, I said, well, it's not quite there in a lot of areas. It's there now in a lot of areas. So it's been moving really, really fast. And we're looking at, okay, how do we leverage it with our clients and our teams so that, hey, you can still service the patient really well, but you don't have to spend as much to do it.
Yeah. And as impressive as it is, they say today is the worst version of AI that you're ever going to see.
Yeah.
It rapidly does keep changing. So you mentioned workflows. Tell me a little bit about automation, because I that's another area that practices really struggle with in an industry where they need to keep evolving and keep adapting, and the model has to sometimes be upgraded. Efficiencies need to improve, and that's sort of a moving target. So how do
Yep.
you use AI from you described it as workflows, maybe an
Yeah.
efficiency standpoint?
Um, so I'll tell you how I think through this because my background is actually in process and engineering side of this. This is my previous life. I was industrial engineer. So there is it is not look. There's different degrees. How I think I suggest everyone just try it and see what it feels like, but make sure to do it in a test in a way that's contained so you don't have potential huge risk. So the way we look at automation is one, you need to figure out the process and the flow. So what's the SOP, standard operating procedures, and how does it flow from point to point? So you can do what's called a process flow diagram. There's also one called a swim lane map. There's all sorts of them out there, right? But draw it out in how the steps work and physically work in each step. What are you doing in each step? So the clear definition around that is really important, which by the way, AI is great for that. Get on a Zoom, make sure the AI meeting recorders in there, just talk and spout it out, and then use AI to figure out, hey, I'm trying to do this. Can you create this for me? There's a little trick called mermaid chart. Mermaid chart is a way to get flow diagrams to be generated inside of LLM. So it's a code that's a standard code that you can go to. I think you just Google mermaid viewer and you copy that code and put it in the mermaid viewer, and it looks like all the boxes and all the stuff tied in together, and you can see visually how it looks. But those two things are important: the standard operating procedure and then the visualization of the workflow. Once you have that, then it's a matter of okay, how do we deal with each step? So I think like generating like marketing content's a popular one for this. This is probably one of the easier ones to do. Um, let's say you want to generate social media posts. Well, what do you want to generate? So what does that workflow look like of how you decide what you want to generate? Is it random ideas? Is it standard stuff? Is it stuff that's happening in the community? Each one of those has a unique flow and different levels of automation. If you just want to have a regular post going out about community events, you could probably you could use so there's three platforms I like a lot. My favorite right now is called n8n.io. So N as in November, eight, like the number eight, like actually typed like it's not spelled out, but it's actually the number. And then N again, like November.io. It's three letters.io. That's a great platform. It's more technical, but it's way more robust and stable. There's make.com, which is really technical and not as stable. And then there's Zapier, which is a lot easier, but not as flexible. So Zapier is probably where people could start first with some of the automation pieces. That's more expensive, but it's not as flexible as the other platforms, but it's probably a good place to start. So try to duplicate your workflow inside of Zapier. I was like, okay, well, this is what I would do manually. Can I do it inside of Zapier? Can I set it up? And there'll be points where it's like, well, I have to make a decision here. I have to make a decision on is this what I want to send out, or I have to write something. That's some activity a human has to do. Any step you have that's where AI can come in. That's where large language models can come in. If you want to create an image, large language models or image generation models can also do that as well now. So that's how you would build out the workflow is figure that out and figure out the points where you can introduce it. It takes some trial and error, and there are error rates, and you have to learn how to deal with the error rates and the kickbacks, and what if this process flow breaks? What's the backup mechanism and escalation points? So if you really make it really robust, it takes some work, but that's something that we can help folks with at my business care team. So we do offer a AI integration support package too for folks if folks need help. But if you're just curious about some things, I'm always happy to help people. If you just want to shoot me a message, I can kind of guide you in the right direction.
Yeah, and even simple workflows. I mean, somebody with even without the background and experience that you have, just to be able to build those models, those workflows, those boxes, those things that probably always looked very intimidating to create before, to be able to take your ideas and have AI create something like that allows you to do something that I've always felt franchises do something really well. And while most independent optometry practices don't necessarily aspire to be franchises because they want to be quote unquote independent and have more flexibility, not follow that rigid structure. However, I've always admired the good franchises in how they create systems, easy to follow systems that allow them to replicate that model over and over. And you can have that internally, but I think AI allows you to do that. It's going to
Yep.
change in an independent practice. It's not going to follow a rigid format like a franchise would over the years, but nevertheless, it allows you to create consistent systems that the people can move in and out of somewhat interchangeably without having to recreate the model and recreate the position every time somebody comes in. Now you're managing, which is a lot easier. As they say, manage the systems, not the people. If you've got good systems, then you get the right people in there, and then you're managing the systems. Then if things are falling through, you look at how do we adjust the systems. But the last one I want to talk about, Ankit, is data. Obviously, there's a strong tie, strong connection between AI and data. How often and how much do doctors look at their data? Probably not as much as they should, whether it's lack of time, whether it's a lack of understanding, whether it's a lack of maybe knowing. There's a lot of numbers in a practice. What do I look at? What's important? Give us some insights into how you would use AI to be able to analyze data in ways that allows doctors to better run their business.
Um, yeah, this is an area where AI is not as good. Data is not an area I would use AI for. What I would use AI for is to write code to analyze data, or talk me to the process of how to analyze something. So you have to have that insight into how to analyze the data first before you can use AI on top of it. It's not gonna, just going to know. Now I say that, right, but there's some things that you can do. So a couple things to note here with the data. One, there's tests done, and AI. There's very few models that'll remember everything you put into the context window, meaning the prompt that you put. Let's say you upload a sheet of data that has like patient ID numbers to uh, and maybe some other factors, and then you have like how much they bought. And so you want to know, hey, who are my best patients by patient ID numbers, right? Something like that is actually really bad for AI, because what it'll do is it won't catch everything in this sheet, and so it doesn't necessarily know how to do the analysis. But what it does know how to do is say, okay, well, I know I need to do this type of analysis. I'll write the Python code to do it for me inside, and then generate the results. So make sure that it's doing that side of it first. Now, I say that with some caveats. There are caveats to that. They're usually the more state of the art models are getting better at that. There are ways to do it that makes it easier. But if you're just doing it out of the gun, saying like, "Hey, I have this stuff," it might be directionally right, but double check the work is what I would say with that. And so it depends on what you want it to do as well. So if you have a huge data, the bigger the data set, the more it's gonna not take everything in consideration, and it's not always going to be accurate. So unless you have a method that you're very deterministic, like I want to do this first, then this, and this is how I want you to do it. Which, by the way, you can use AI to create that set of instructions. Say, I have this data. This is how I want to transform this information I want to do. Write a step-by-step process and code that I would need to write for another LLM or AI bot to analyze it for me. And use one of the smarter models like Gemini is a really my favorite. One of my favorites is Gemini right now. That's a good one. Any OpenAI model, and once it has that, then you say, okay, now here's the data, here's the process. Go follow this process, analyze this data, and that's a good way to do it. But it's not as easy as, hey, tell me about this data that I'm giving to you just point blank. And also, if you're using like the non-thinking models, which I don't know if we want to get into what that is or what isn't, but if you're using the standard ChatGPT 4.0, which probably most people are, it's not as good with that. It's actually really kind of bad with it. So you want to use one of the more expensive models or state-of-the-art models, but even then, they're not. You still want them to write code to do the analysis. So it's
So,
better for like writing and automation and task and judgment and testing. And that is, it's more reliable with. It's not quite as reliable. You can do things to make it reliable with the data. It's just someone who doesn't have experience around it would have a tough time doing that.
so much like myself, not good with math is what you're saying. Not that, but yeah,
Not yet. I mean, that
not
could
yet,
change, right? So there's
and it
some
probably
things coming
will.
out that are pretty good.
It's a fascinating tool, and it's a fascinating, as we see it evolve before our eyes. It's just a fascinating addition to practice that's going to continue to penetrate things both clinically and through the business aspects as well. So maybe we'll have you on every 6 months or so to update us, and we'll go back and laugh at the old episodes.
Probably. Yeah, it's going to
We
be crazy.
probably will. You're right. Every couple of weeks, it seems to be changing a lot. So, thanks so much for your time. For anyone who wants to reach out to you to learn more about this, or to learn more about your company, or to get help with some of the things we talked about, how would they find you or your company?
Yeah, we are iDoc partners. So any of the iDoc consultants can guide you to us, or go to mybcat.com. So that's MYBCAT, MyBizBcat, which is short for mybusinesscareteam.com, and be happy to help. And then my email is ankit@mybcat.com. So that's ANKIT at MYBCAT.com.
Ankit, always a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. It was fun.
Thanks again to Ankit. Thanks everyone for listening. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and we will see you in the next episode. Thanks.